Byung-Chul Han is a South Korean-born German philosopher, known for writing books that are violently brief. They rarely exceed 100 pages. Because of this, they're the ultimate hiking companion. They slip into a jacket pocket and are perfect for a few moments of deep reflection during a break on the trail. But there is a brilliant, unsettling irony here. Infocracy is a book that explicitly warns us about how digital culture has destroyed our attention spans. Han argues, we've been conditioned to only process short, atomized bursts of information, rather than long, sustained narratives. So why is this book so small? Because Han knows that if he wrote a 500-page tome, the modern digitized mind wouldn't read it. The book itself is a product of the very crisis it diagnoses. It adopts the brevity forced upon us by the digital regime just to get its foot in the door. Today, we're taking this pocket-sized work into the quiet of the Blue Mountains, west of Sydney, to try and find a hidden oasis that feels miles away from civilization. We've got some fire trails to traverse before a steep scramble through the bush down to a creek with waterfalls and a beautiful clear swimming hole. The plan is to use this absolute silence and isolation of nature to better understand Han's critique of our hyper-connected world and its relentless torrent of data. If you wanted to build a perfect prison, you wouldn't use stone walls, iron bars, or armed guards. They're just clumsy. They invite resistance because the prisoner can see exactly who is dominating them. No, if you want to build a truly flawless system of control, you would make the prison look like an instrument of liberation. You would give every inmate a sleek rectangle of glass and aluminium, connect them to a global network, and tell them they are entirely free. This is the psychological reality of what Byung-Chul Han calls the infocracy. Han argues that we have moved past the industrial age of capitalism into the era of info-capitalism. Power no longer rules us through physical discipline or state coercion. It rules us through the algorithm and the manipulation of information. And the terrifying brilliance of this new regime is that it doesn't feel oppressive. In a traditional dictatorship, citizens are forced into silence. In an infocracy, we are exhorted to speak. We are encouraged to share, to comment, to broadcast our inner lives, our morning coffee, our deepest anxieties, and our sudden rages. We think we are expressing our authenticity, but in reality, we are voluntarily handing over the precise behavioral data needed to map, predict, and optimize our choices beneath our conscious awareness. Power has become psychopolitical. It doesn't force us to act against our will. It quietly optimizes our environment so that our free choices align perfectly with algorithmic goals. We mistake connectivity for freedom and a relentless torrent of information for truth. But information thrives on novelty, speed, and cognitive stimulation. It crowds out the stability and quiet required for genuine thought. The digital revolution promised total liberation. Instead, it built an invisible, decentralized cage where the door is wide open, but we have no desire to leave. Breaking free doesn't require more data or more connectivity. It requires the capacity for deep attention, for patience, and for silence.
In the modern world, we are drowning in information. Information is just like a rushing creek. It is atomized, fleeting, and designed for immediate consumption. It thrives on shock, novelty, and the emotional stimulus, triggering an instant reaction before vanishing to make room for the next wave. When our daily diet consists of fragmented bits of information, news stories, social media posts, and videos, our ability to grasp a cohesive narrative of reality breaks down. This data isn't designed to connect us to a wider context, and it certainly isn't designed to last. It is built to consume our attention and then vanish. In today's world, the stream of information simply rushes past the truth. There's no time for anyone to truly think. By the time we finish reading or watching a news story, we're being blasted with the next before we even have time to digest it. When the mind is trapped in this current, it is impossible to linger. The constant acceleration of digital data pushes aside the very things that make us human: deep knowledge, real experience, and true insight. We need to appreciate how radically different this is to the experience of every other human being that has ever lived. As Han diagnoses, information is relevant only fleetingly. Because it lives off the appeal of surprise, information lacks temporal stability. And because of its temporal instability, it fragments our perception. It draws reality into a permanent frenzy of actuality. Truth, by contrast, is like ancient sandstone. It requires duration, stability, and slow cultivation. Truth does not blink or buzz. It is a narrative structure that anchors our lives, giving us a shared, unshakable reality. Han warns us that the temporality of truth is completely different to that of information. He says, while information is relevant only very briefly, truth is characterized by duration. It stabilizes life. It is the ground on which we stand and the sky that stretches above us. But in the age of information, that stability is dissolving. We are suffering from a state of perpetual cognitive distraction. The age of truth is dead, Han cries out like a modern-day Zarathustra, supplanted entirely by an endless stream of unverified, contingent, surface-level information. Fake news. This data doesn't illuminate anything about reality. In fact, it does the opposite. It disorients people, produces anxiety, and fragments our perception. And because of this environment, we become increasingly susceptible to the lie. This is the fertile soil for the modern conspiracy theory. Stripped of the enduring connecting architecture of truth, humanity loses its orientation. We become desperate for a narrative framework, any framework, to make sense of the chaos. So we build our own, or inherit fictions that crumble under the slightest scrutiny. We are simply too caught up in the frantic rush of the data cycle to realize we are being led astray. When a society trades its bedrock of truth for a fleeting flood of data, the entire structure of how we live, communicate, and govern ourselves begins to collapse. As Han writes, in the digital order, this stability gives way to the fleetingness of information. We will probably have to make do with information. The age of truth appears to be over. The regime of information has supplanted the regime of truth. To understand our digital trap, Byung-Chul Han says we must first look backward to what the French philosopher Michel Foucault called the disciplinary society. This was the blueprint of the industrial era. Think factories, boarding schools, and prisons. Systems built to do two things: make human beings politically obedient and economically productive. Disciplinary power doesn't ask, it commands. It relies on prohibitions. You must work these hours, you must stand in this line. It physically shapes compliance through strict routines, schedules, and enforced spaces. The ultimate symbol of the disciplinary society is the Panopticon, a genius, terrifying concept for a circular prison. Picture cells curving around a central watchtower. The tower windows are pitch black. The inmates can be seen at any moment, but they can never see inside the tower. They never know if a guard is actually there watching. As its original architect, Jeremy Bentham, put it, the power of the master is achieved not by direct intervention, but by the position he occupies. Because the prisoner can never prove they aren't being watched, they must assume they are. The genius and the terror is that the inmate internalizes the gaze of the warden. They become their own jailer, policing their own behavior to avoid punishments, even if the watchtower is completely empty. This is George Orwell's Big Brother is watching you. It's a culture of maximum compliance achieved through total top-down oversight. It is a brutal model of control, but Han's central warning in Infocracy is simple. That world is gone. The old Panopticon relied on stone walls, iron bars, and visible surveillance. Today, the walls have vanished, replaced by the digital cloud. We aren't being forced into cells anymore. We are inviting the watchtower straight into our pockets. While Big Brother controlled us through fear, the digital Panopticon controls us through pleasure. Han calls this the shift from biopolitics to psychopolitics. The old regime handcuffed the body. The new regime programs the mind. We think we are free because we willingly swipe, click, and share. But beneath our conscious awareness lies what Han calls the digital unconscious. Algorithms track our pre-reflexive instincts, our micro-preferences, our flashes of outrage, and our hidden anxieties. Data-driven psychopolitics doesn't suppress our desires. It maps them, optimizes them, and feeds them back to us before we even know we have them. The ultimate triumph of the Infocracy is that it doesn't need to police us at all. It has achieved something far more terrifying. A prison where our very sense of freedom is the mechanism of our confinement. The ultimate expression of the digital panopticon is the optimized self. Han argues that influencers on YouTube and Instagram have deeply internalized the neoliberal technologies of power. Whether they peddle travel, beauty, fitness, or the outdoor lifestyle, they constantly invoke freedom and authenticity. But it's not just marketing. Han argues that it has become a full-blown substitute for religion. He says, influencers are worshipped as idols, and this gives their presentations a religious character. Influencers claiming to be motivational coaches present themselves as saviors, and their followers, their disciples, take part in the influencers' lives by buying the products the influencers pretend to consume in staged scenes from their everyday life. A kind of digital Eucharist. Social media is a church. Like is amen. Sharing is communion. Consumption is salvation. The repetition that influencers use as a dramatic tool does not bore, rather, it gives the whole affair the character of a liturgy. When we film our morning coffee rituals by the tent, our meditative pauses on the ridge, and our triumphant arrival at the summit, we are participating directly in this church. We are offering our experiences up to the network, seeking a digital absolution. And in true consumerist fashion, the entire process becomes a means of transforming the bush into a marketplace, where the logic of efficiency is repackaged as the path to salvation and self-realization. Influencers don't just sell you a walk through the bush. They sell you a hyper-optimized metrics game, Dyneema tents, titanium stoves, and carbon fiber poles, all framed as the ultimate ticket to freedom and authenticity. But beneath the lifestyle aesthetic lies the exact same corporate logic of the digital regime, the belief that human experience can be bought, measured, and perfected by the right piece of technology. As Han violently puts it, we consume ourselves to death while realizing ourselves to death. Consumption and identity become one.
Democracy is a slow, grueling climb. It requires what Han calls discursive rationality, a time-intensive practice of providing reasons, listening to counter-arguments, and being willing to learn from mistakes. But the Infocracy doesn't want us to climb. It wants us to slide. Under the information regime, deliberate, rational discourse is completely replaced by affective communication. The system operates on the logic of the like. It bypasses our critical understanding entirely, targeting our pre-reflexive, instinctual, and emotional layers, what Han calls the digital unconscious. In this algorithmic arena, it is never the better argument that wins. It is simply the most exciting, shocking, or metrics-optimized piece of data. Han points out that a single fragment of decontextualized information or fake news triggers an instant visceral response. It spreads at a viral velocity because it is quicker and more profitable to appeal to raw affect than to human reason. Like a sliding stone, one provocative post triggers a massive swarm of automated outrage. The architecture of the digital network turns communication into an information war, where automated bots and internet trolls disfigure the political climate with zero marginal cost. As Han writes, discursive rationality is today under threat from affective communication. We allow ourselves to be easily affected by fast sequences of information. It is quicker to appeal to affect than to rationality. In affective communication, it is not the better argument, but the most exciting information that prevails. Fake news is more interesting than fact. A single tweet containing fake news or a fragment of decontextualized information may be more effective than a reasoned argument. This is the death of deliberation. When politics is reduced to a fast sequence of emotional stimuli, stable convictions and long-term principles are sacrificed for quick, short-lived power gains. We think we are participating in a democracy because we are constantly expressing ourselves. But when a society reacts purely on affect, it stops reasoning. It becomes nothing more than a hyper-reactive swarm, sliding blindly down the slope of whoever controls the algorithm. Byung-Chul Han's diagnosis in Infocracy can feel entirely fatalistic. He warns us that the age of truth is over, that the public sphere is shattered into a chaotic swarm, and that we have willingly turned our own desires into tools of digital subjugation. But as the trail forces us upward and the wilderness quietens the chatter of the mind, sharpening the moment, we realize what the antidote is. Han argues that to save democracy and to save ourselves, we have to reclaim what he calls the vita contemplativa, the contemplative life. We need to recover the capacity for silence, for hesitation, and for deep, unhurried reflection. The digital swarm thrives on absolute acceleration. It is hyper-reactive, constantly clicking, and endlessly consuming. It makes space transparent and time weightless. But out here on the uphill climb, everything has weight. The dirt under our feet is stubborn. The cliffs don't compete for our attention. The trees are silent observers. This is why the simple act of carrying a tiny 100-page book into the rugged silence of the bush feels so radically subversive. Walking up this hill, away from the data streams, isn't just an escape. It is an act of political resistance. It is a refusal to perform for the unseen master. It is a deliberate choice to step out of the transparent digital cave and stand on the stubborn, factual ground of reality. Han writes that, today, thinking ourselves free, we are in fact captives in a digital cave. We are tied to the digital screen. The prisoners in Plato's cave are intoxicated by mythic and narrative images. The digital cave, by contrast, holds us captive in information. The light of truth has died down completely. The cave of information has no outside. The loud buzz of information blurs the contours of being. Truth does not buzz. The Infocracy conquers us by compelling us to look at the screen. The climb out reminds us that the only way to break the spell is to step out of the currents and return to the ground beneath our feet.